All right. So welcome AMS Weather Band members. My name is Doug Hilderbrand. I'm a meteorologist with the National Weather Service, focusing on preparedness and resilience from individuals to communities to businesses. And I'm also the chair of the AMS Weather Band committee that helps, brainstorm great conversations like we're about to have tonight. The webinar is titled, Are You Ocean Safe? Coastal Weather and Beach Safety with our guest, Bruckner Chase. Welcome, Bruckner. A few things about your bio here. So first of all, I love this title, that you're an ocean adventure athlete. You've done triathlons. You have been swimming all your life. I see here 25 miles across the Monterey Bay. I'm not going to even tell you if you were scared of sharks. And you did that about 10 years ago, 22 miles in Lake Tahoe, which seems a little bit colder, but a little bit safer on the shark front. You are an ocean and coastal safety expert working very closely with NOAA and the National Weather Service. You're a speaker and an educator, and maybe you're most proud of the education side of your job, as well as an event and film producer. And for those who want to learn a little bit more about Bruckner and a little bit more about the organization that he represents, you can go to B as in Bruckner, C as in Chase, oceanpositive.org.
Yep.
So welcome, Bruckner.
Doug, it's great to be here. And I know we haven't seen each other in person in way too long, but this is, we're in the thick and heat of summer right now. I'm on the shore in the Jersey Shore right now, and we're talking about your experiences in Virginia Beach recently. I'm in the thick of training lifeguards and creating positive experiences for people out on the water, visiting the shore. And I could not be happier to be able to open up this discussion and talk about how we merge what we learn about the weather and coastal conditions as we head to vacation or a day at the beach, and then what we do when we're there. And, on the unlikely event that we see someone we know in trouble or see someone else in trouble, how do we respond? What do we do to protect ourselves and others? And I will tell you that as this is one of the most crowded seasons we've seen on the South Jersey Shore. And I'll also tell you that a lot of the lifeguard agencies are spread really thin, that, we have a lot of guards that'll be leaving to go back to college. So we're all spread kind of thin just to man the stands. And so if we can have people arrive at the shore, whether that's the East Coast or West Coast or somewhere in the South Pacific, informed and knowing what to do, that creates a protective factor that may not require a lifeguard to get wet. And ideally, we want to keep the lifeguards dry. We know that everybody's safe if we can keep every lifeguard dry and people are just having great experiences in the water.
So that's, great points you're making. It's really interesting when you talk about, weather and beach safety, because I think a lot of people will equate a great beach day with a great weather day.
Right.
And sometimes that's the wrong thinking, where it could be beautiful, sunshine, warm, but there are hazards that lurk out in the oceans, and that we do have to take precautions on while just having an enjoyable experience. So let's get the brass tacks here. Mm-hmm. What is the scope of the problem that we're all here today talking about?
I think the scope of, rather than the scope of the problem, it's kind of the scope of the opportunity for people to understand a little bit more about how weather that they can take for granted if they're inland 100 miles might be very different from the dynamic conditions that they may run across on a large inland lake or on the ocean that I call home. And I think that we refer to the ocean as swimmers and lifeguards and athletes, we refer to it as dynamic open water because it's constantly changing. In our area, we'll have a tidal change of anywhere from 3 to 5 feet over the course of 6 hours. And we'll have some beachgoers that come to us each day that it's maybe their first time at the ocean, and they go, will the ocean be moving today? And what they mean is the coming and going of the tides up and down the beach, but they have never experienced it before. So for a first time, they don't know what dangers may lie in sandbars that are being exposed, or submerged hazards that used to be under 3 feet of water that are now under 6 inches of water. And then also how quickly winds can change and make conditions on the surface of the water very dangerous, how they can then push people into dangerous conditions, and then the effect that wind can have on waves and how that can impact a person trying to walk out through the power of these crushing waves. And I think that as we take the tools and the information that Weather Service provides about storm warnings and weather warnings, and then how does that actually impact me on this beach? And then also realize that beaches can also become little micro ecosystems of their own, that it may be a beautiful day 5 miles away on the other side of the bridge, but we'll have a dense fog bank roll in that all of a sudden, if you were 20 yards offshore, you couldn't see the beach anymore. And that's why that level of understanding of weather as it impacts the ocean and your experience on the beach is going to keep you safe and make sure you have a lot more positive experiences there.
So you've experienced the, you know, the threat, right? Like you've seen, you've rescued, you've literally saved lives, right?
Yes.
And
yeah.
I've lost, you know, a dear colleague of ours at NOAA from, you know, rough surf and rip currents. I've heard stories of, you know, friends of friends that have lost a child in the ocean. You know, these devastate, you know, not only the family, but whole communities when these things happen. Where do we start on this conversation? You know, is it, you know, well, before you take that trip, can you talk to me and our audience about the difference between, say, being proficient in a pool environment versus an ocean environment? How important is that experience? And sort of how do you gain that experience while also reducing the risk?
That's great. I think that, you know, one of the things that we did recently with this National Weather Service Wave Safe series is we recognize that people arrive at different coastlines that may present very different experiences, different hazards, different ways of being at the shore. People also arrive from very different backgrounds, different levels of experience with the water and with the ocean. And I would say that a large number of the people that we end up needing to rescue or assist in the water, and keep in mind that on the beaches along the Mid-Atlantic region, most of the guarding that we do is very proactive, that we're trying to prevent situations from escalating to becoming very dangerous. So you'll see stands every 200 or 300 meters, and you'll see really controlled swim areas. And this is different in different beaches, whether you go to the Gulf Coast or Florida or Northern California, how they're guarded and how they're protected changes a lot. And I think it's important that people, we talk about, well, it should be just common sense. It's common sense that you would know this. And the fallacy or the challenge in that is, if someone doesn't have a common experience with being hit by a 2-foot or 3-foot wave, they won't have common sense because they've never experienced that before. I know from being on the water in places all over the world in challenging conditions that I know what a 5-mile-an-hour wind will do to the surface of the ocean if it's coming from the south, what it will do at 10 miles an hour, at 15, and at 20, and then when I need to stay on shore. And I think that we have a lot of people that arrive on the beach and they'll even walk up to the lifeguard stand and go, I'm an experienced swimmer. I swam in high school. I've been on a swim team my whole life, but this is my first time at the ocean. Is there anything I should know? And there is so much that as a lifeguard, we'd want to tell that person that it's almost overwhelming. And I think it starts with, you need to respect what you don't know. You know, that there's stuff that many of us that live here have been able to experience and absorb to become almost second nature. And I think that it is exponentially harder to swim in the ocean than it is in the pool. Not because you don't have walls or a place to stand up and rest, but you may arrive at the ocean on your first day of vacation and the wind is blowing from the beach at 5 miles an hour. The surf and swell is less than a foot and it looks like a lake. And then all of a sudden you get an alert from the Weather Service that said the winds are going to be 20 miles an hour, blowing onshore at 15 miles an hour, gusting to 25. And the swell is going to be 3 to 4 feet. Well, some people might think, well, I'm 6 feet tall. What difference does a 3-foot wave make? And yeah, the wind will make it cooler when I'm sitting on the beach. And so what actually happens is you end up with really dangerous wave and weather and water conditions that won't just make it harder than swimming in a pool, but virtually impossible unless you know how to navigate through conditions like that. I mean, there's a reason that you see lifeguards going in to help people, often carrying fins, because they know the extra power they may need to get through certain conditions. Or why you'll never see a lifeguard charging into the water without a rescue can with them, because they know they need to protect themselves and someone else, that they need to get there to that person with the tools and knowledge and not feel like they're, barely surviving on their own. And I think that a lot of people, while we talk about a number one way to prevent drownings is to have people know how to swim. That's utterly important, very, very important. But a lot of our friends north of the border in Canada, Life Saving Society Canada, also focus on skills that are survival swimming. Not necessarily knowing how to swim butterfly and backstroke and breaststroke like you're going to see in the Olympics in a couple of weeks, but how to keep yourself afloat if you end up in the water when you don't mean to be. And I think that a lot of times when people get themselves in trouble, we tell them the number one thing you can do is to relax, not to panic, and relax and stay afloat. You don't necessarily need to be able to swim out of extreme conditions, but if you can relax and stay afloat, signal to others, and give rescuers the chance to respond and give them time to help. When people panic, they start to decrease that window of when they can, keep themselves safe. And it decreases the time that one of us might have to get to them. And I think that understanding that it's not only harder, but it can actually be almost unswimmable at times. And, we talk about, a lot of times we'll talk about a current moving at 2 knots or 3 miles per hour, or 4 knots, but it's hard for someone who's not spent time in the water to know what it feels like to be in a current moving that fast. And we often will say, well, if the current's moving at 3 miles an hour, that's the equivalent of someone swimming repeatedly faster than 1 minute and 20 seconds per 100, roughly, which is pretty quick. So if someone's got a swimming background, they go, oh, wow, I can't swim that fast. Well, that's how fast the current's going to take you where it wants to take you. But if you're not a swimmer, 3 miles an hour doesn't seem that fast. That's,
right.
You can walk faster than that. But things are very different in the water. Perspective changes. The shock of being in cold water, and when I say cold water, that means 72 degrees, which might be refreshing if it's a backyard pool, but it can have physiological effects on you if you're a swimmer or if you're someone who gets knocked off of a pier or swept off of a jetty. When it's not just about knowing how to swim, but putting that swimming skill to use when you end up in a situation you never expected to see happen.
Right. Right. No, I know from my, I wouldn't say I'm a beach bum, but, I've had surfing experiences and I love being at the beach and boogie boarding and all that. The power of moving water, I know a lot of people experience it and you get sort of, experience is everything, right? But that first time that you just get tossed, 170-pound man, and I just, I'll just get swept off my feet. It is something to respect. And so that's sort of, step number one is respect. Yeah. Okay. So we do the education prior to, getting to the beach. And then we have, many people will have seen, rip current, break the grip of the rip, and again, rule number one is don't panic. I say that's easier said than done, that when you're in the mouth of the lion, your natural instinct is to take a breath when you may not be above water level. And then, you know, it dissolves into something bad. What are, you know, let's talk about rip currents. Okay. So one, I feel like we focus maybe too much on the rip current threat itself, that we don't focus on the actual surf, the water, the longshore current, the waves that will hit you, knock you off, get you disoriented. And then then sort of the threat of the rip current kind of comes in as a secondary force. But sort of what's your perspective on, you're in the water, where's sort of hazard number 1, 2, and 3?
It is so great to hear you say that. And I think that I agree with you 100% that we focus a lot on rip currents, and we need to take a step upstream from that a little bit. I will tell you that people will survive 100% of the rip currents they never end up in. And that rip currents have almost become the go-to sort of, he ended up in a rip. And if you look back over the U.S. Lifeguard Association's data over the last 20 years, they, you know, the reporting agencies will state, you know, what was the rescue from, you know, what caused it. And maybe 50% are identified as rip currents. And I will tell you, as someone who is a professional ocean lifeguard and trains rookie lifeguards and seasoned lifeguards, even lifeguards may or may not be always able to recognize a rip current, that it can be subtle. They don't always appear as clear as they may in some of the videos. But I will tell you this, whether or not I can see a rip current, if I can see white caps on the surface of the water, if I can feel a really strong wind hitting me from the ocean, and if I can see waves that are above my waist, I know that there are chances that if I get out in that, I might end up in a rip. And I think a lot of people that find themselves in rip currents may have entered water that was something, if they'd understood it, they probably wouldn't have gone into in the first place. That a rip current may eventually be what you end up in that pulls you further out, but being knocked over by a 3-foot wave, which might be the equivalent of trying to hold a car with its parking brake off, you know, rolling downhill, even a 3-foot wave knocking you and driving you into the sand and knocking your breath out. If the wind's really strong and that waist deep to stomach high section of water is really turbulent, people will find it hard just to stand back up in that again, even if there isn't necessarily a rip current. We were talking about too, longitudinal currents that run along the beach. So I think that really paying attention to, you know, the education before you arrive at the beach, you know, learning about the weather forecast for that area that you're heading to specifically, and knowing that, let's say if in my area, a lot of times you might get a weather report that's coming from the airport that might be 10 or 15 miles inland. It may not be from Beach Patrol headquarters. So you want to make sure that what you're learning about in advance is as specific as possible to where you actually are. And then we always encourage people, and this is part of the Wave Safe series, even when you arrive at the beach, spend 15 minutes surveying the scene. What do you see? Do you see the flags on the lifeguard headquarters or on the buildings? How strong are they moving? What direction are they moving in? If the wind is coming from the ocean, you know that it's going to churn up that water a lot more and create possibly dangerous waves and currents. And I think that 15-minute pause, and we tell people to stop in a safe zone where you're above where the water could hit you. It's kind of where you're getting your gear ready with the family and kids to walk down to the beach. And that's where you look for warning signs. If you're near a lifeguard headquarters or a stand, there might be rip current warning signs on the beach access point, or they may be more specific, warning you about severe shore break where waves are breaking on shallow waters, or it might alert you to strong currents, submerged objects like rocks or jetties or coral. that when you walk up in that first 15 minutes, are there signs telling you, hey, look out for this? Because we often tell people just because you know a beach doesn't mean you know every beach. You know, I've been a lifeguard and I've done ocean swims all over the world, from Australia to Alaska to Europe. But if I show up on a beach in Waikiki or on the North Shore, first place I'm going to go, lifeguard stand. I'm going to go, hey, I'm a lifeguard. I know ocean, but I'd like to know more about your ocean and this beach. And I think that there may be signs or there may be people that can give you that information. And if you are choosing a guarded beach, which you always should, whenever possible, our lifeguard stands will fly flags, letting you know how dangerous those conditions might be. If we're flying a green flag, it's going to be pretty safe. You know, bring out the boogie boards and come out with the family, young and old. We're guarding it, and we know that this is a pretty safe day. A few days ago, it was yellow, which means if you've never been to the ocean before, you're going to get pulled by currents. You may be knocked off your feet by waves. And I will tell you, on yellow flag days, we're not looking away from the water. We're watching it all the time, and we're maintaining a very high level of alertness. And if it's a red flag day, yeah, you're not going in, or you really shouldn't. It may not be a day where we have the beach closed, but if you see red flags flying from a lifeguard stand, or you see a red flag with a no swim symbol, that's time to not go in. And chances are we're setting that based on what we see in front of us and based on weather reports that we're getting from Weather Service. Are there storm fronts? Is there lightning in the area? Because you may have lightning that's still 10 miles away that can be a threat on the beach. I've been on the beach enough that have literally seen lightning strikes hit beach umbrella cabanas and erupt in flames less than a few hundred yards away. And
wow.
It's very dramatic. And, you know, unless you live here all the time, you may not experience and see that firsthand. So not only do we want to respect the ocean, you know, but respect the professionals and the lifeguards that are there, that, you know, their job is to help you have positive experiences there. And they're going to give you insight that's really valuable. They're not trying to keep you from having fun. They're not trying to be a buzzkill. They want you to be able to enjoy it the same way we do.
So we have I'm going to take a pause for a little bit. We have one question coming in about, you know, a swimmer saying disabled by a jellyfish. And I know, you know, jellyfish are painful, but, you know, our lifeguard, like what? So here's the question. Curious what shore lifeguards would do in order to safely rescue a swimmer who's disabled due to jellyfish stings, especially if there's no rowboat available. I mean, are your lifeguards just going to power through those stings because they just have that experience and, you know, they're such, you know, peak athletes, or do they have other precautions that or, you know, equipment that they can use?
It's a really good question. And I will tell you that the specific answer may vary from country to country and beach to beach. In Australia, where they have stinging jellyfish that will cause shock that could kill someone within 30 minutes, box jellies, that lifeguards in the past in Australia actually had stinger suits if they needed to go out through the water that would keep them from being stung. I will tell you that if you go to Hawaii while they're having a Portuguese man o' war, you know, that time of year, they'll be flying. It's different everywhere, but they may be flying purple flags, which indicate stingers in the water. If you come here, you may see jellyfish washed up on the beach, or you'll see purple flags. That's a traditional symbol that there are stingers in the water. Different people react to jellyfish stings differently. You mentioned a swim across Monterey Bay. I was stung by jellyfish for 10 hours. It was the most painful experience of my life. It was really pretty horrible. And I know that I'm not allergic to jellyfish stings, that it's very painful, but that pain kind of goes away. But for someone not used to it, that pain can be, like the person asking the question, can be very incapacitating. Often what we see here is if there are schools of jellyfish, that are just flooding the beaches, we're going to tell people,
Right.
don't go in. Often though, if someone gets stung by a jellyfish, and I saw some this past weekend, it's 1 or 2 jellyfish, that person got stung. If I'm a lifeguard and they get stung and they're in distress, I'm going to go out there. Chances are, unless it's a school, I may or may not get stung. But if I do get stung, I've probably been stung before, and it's not going to be incapacitating. That I know what my limits are. I'm not going to have an allergic response, and I'll still be able to perform a rescue. Kind of like a lifeguard running into, 56-degree water, that shock to the system. Kind of trained for it. Not that they throw jellyfish at us in rookie school, but most of us have had an experience being stung, and also know that it's probably an isolated jellyfish that hit that swimmer. And by the time we get there, the jellyfish is probably drifted on. And once we bring that person to shore, there's things that different lifeguard agencies will do to treat that sting, and the treatment protocols will vary from beach to beach based on what the stinger is, and that person's response. Normally, you would monitor the person to make sure that they're not allergic, that they're not having breathing problems or something else. But if you're in an area where most of the jellyfish are like being stung by a bee, where it's not, immediately life-threatening because of the level of toxin, the lifeguards are going to get stung, possibly, but, we put ourselves in dangerous situations and uncomfortable or painful situations often. I brought someone in the other day, and I'm getting dunked repeatedly by the waves while I'm holding them up.
Wow.
Not comfortable, but it kind of comes with the job.
So we got another question, and I absolutely love this lightning question because it really strikes at the heart of the challenges that I face every day on the preparedness and sort of human behavior side of things. But I'm gonna hold off on that question because I want to talk about something that is dear to your heart. So rip currents across the country, statistically are about, I want to say about 100 fatalities a year.
Yeah, and actually, looking at statistics from the U.S. Lifeguard Association, rip current deaths for 2019 were 86.
86.
Total rip current deaths in 2018 were 35.
And then you add on to that the unknown and the the surf related.
Yeah. So that's just looking at rips. And if you look at just drowning deaths on unguarded beaches in 2019, 124.
Unguarded.
So yeah. Unguarded beaches in 2018, drowning deaths where someone died on an unguarded beach, 134 in 2018. Drowning deaths on guarded beaches, only 29.
Okay. Well, there you go. That's,
yeah.
It's like wearing a seatbelt in your car and not wearing a seatbelt if you're choosing an area that's unguarded. And it could be unguarded, or it could be a guarded beach, but after hours.
Yeah.
Type of
Yeah.
thing.
And exactly. And different municipalities and they set their guard hours. Not everyone has unlimited budgets to guard 24 hours. There'll be alert shifts, and there'll be guards that are often there early, or there'll be emergency numbers to call, so that if you're on the mid-Atlantic shore in the summer, there's an operational system in place that can get response to someone in the water pretty quickly. Kind of the police and fire and lifeguard agencies are all kind of primed for water-based emergencies. And then there are hours during the day where you will literally see guards sitting on the stand. And I think that, the reason there are still, deaths on guarded beaches is, things happen,
Sure.
it could be, a physiological response. It could be a cardiac response. It could be, it's still a dynamic and dangerous environment. And obviously lifeguards are extremely effective in, if you look at the number of saves and rescues, so of those, 29 deaths on guarded beaches, in that same year, there were 1,845 reported rescues on those same
Wow.
guarded beaches. So, you know, obviously lifeguards are playing a very critical role in making sure that that number isn't substantially higher. But we also know, and this was an experience in the Mid-Atlantic, we had a really nice fall where people were still flooding to the beaches, even after a lot of the lifeguard agencies had shut down for the fall. And we were having a lot of rescues in really dangerous ocean conditions due to offshore storms that people from shore don't realize. These offshore storms means that it's great weather where the sand is dry, and it's deadly weather as soon as the sand's wet and into the water.
Right.
That there's literally a fine line between safe and great and dangerous and deadly if you're not ready for it. And I think that, yeah.
No, I was just going to say, what a tweet that our National Weather Service forecast office in Mobile, Alabama, and it's still hard to really grasp this, but and I don't have all the specifics off the top of my head, but it's like over the last like 10 or 20 years, they have had more rip current and surf fatalities than flooding, hurricanes, tornadoes combined. So when you look at, I guess my point in all of this is that, people might be wondering, well, what does the Weather Service, why is the Weather Service so involved in rip currents? But there is a weather component. We provide marine forecasts, beach forecasts, beach hazards. And so this is part of our, in our mission of saving lives and property. It's all about beach safety. So I want to get to something very important on your end. So too many times I feel you'll see the headline where either one person, usually a child, will be in distress in a rip current, kind of going out to deeper sea. A parent or somebody tries to be that hero, that rescuer, goes in after them, and they're either both are fatalities, or the actual rescuer is the one that loses their life, and the professionals come in and actually save the original person in distress. And so I want to I want you to talk about this Take 10 initiative to prevent second victim drownings.
I think it's really important. And I want to add one other piece to what you're talking about, and why National Weather Service and NOAA have devoted so many resources to addressing all the hazards that impact us. In 2021, they launched something that they've been working on for a long time, which is a rip current modeling program, so that they combine all those weather influences and a knowledge of the bathymetry of the shore to say that this is a high chance of rips in this area. And that modeling tool is really good to help take stuff that some people may not be able to understand as far as how it affects the water, and say, this is what is really could happen with rips in this specific beach. And I think getting to the Take 10 and what we call second victim drownings, another phrase that we often will hear or use is drowning for love, where you see
drowning for love.
Drowning for love. Yes. 2 years ago in Atlantic City, a young girl was in trouble in the surf. The lifeguard that was about to come on duty, this is before the guards were on duty. Guard saw the girl in trouble, ran out, was able to get to her. Unbeknownst to the guards, the father of the girl had also gone out. They got to the girl and brought her in, but the father ended up drowning and was not recovered in that rescue. And we see that happen a lot in remote beaches as well, where a parent or loved one will see someone in trouble and they'll charge out into the water, and now there's potentially two victims, and very often the would-be rescuer becomes the victim. It often is an older parent that goes in to save them, and maybe they can get the child back, but they can't get the other person back. And if Tierney has before we talk about this, we have the Take 10 video clip that we put together with NOAA, National Weather Service. And if we can cue up that animation or perhaps share that, that would be a great time to take a look at that. It's a short piece that I think is a really good takeaway from this.
All right, here we go.
Oh, here we go. So this is Take 10 with the National Weather Service, what to do if you see someone else in trouble.
What if something happens to you or someone else? Keeping yourself safe while also helping others can save lives. When you see someone else in trouble and before you act, stay calm and practice what we call Take 10. Pause to alert the lifeguards or someone on the beach and call 911. While help is coming, look for something that floats or will let you reach and assist the person in trouble while you stay safe. The most important action you can take is to protect yourself first so you don't become the tragic second victim.
To have fun and stay safe, always respect the power of the ocean and be wave safe.
And I don't know if I can say it better than a cartoon character. So.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's you know, sort of time and time again, you're reading a news article and it's almost like you can, you know, I've seen this movie before where, you know, the tragic circumstance just gets compounded.
And let me walk people. A lot of times
Sure.
people go, I can't do that. You know, it's going to happen so fast. You know, how can you tell me to pause and wait? And I'll tell you that if a lifeguard sees someone in trouble in the stand, you know, if it's a single victim or multi-victim, before we go charging out to the water, there's certain steps that we're going to do that take about 10 seconds. You know, we're going to have, at least the way we guard the beaches in South Jersey, we have whistles. So we'll blow what we call 3 shorts, which will alert the other lifeguards that there's an emergency at this stand. We may also call on the radio saying we've got a code, whatever, at this beach, so that then activates a system where other guards are coming to that beach to assist. So we know now that we've alerted a system that's going to back us up if things get worse. And also, as I leave that stand, I'm grabbing a rescue can, maybe grabbing fins, so that I've got tools to help keep that person afloat and to get them back in. So I've alerted other professionals that are going to help me, and I've brought tools with me to go out there as well. And I tell every one of our lifeguards, you know, from rookies that we just hired, the most important tool that you can take out into the water on a rescue is a calm state of mind. That you just practice and drill this, and this is what you do so that you can make good decisions that don't put the victim in greater risk or yourself. And I think that, you know, if you see someone in trouble, like they're at a jetty and the lifeguard might be looking at the other direction, and this happened to be in Hawaii. We were on a project with the Weather Service and we saw someone in trouble getting pulled out through a gap in the wall. First thing I did was not swim out where someone was signaling they were in trouble, but I signaled to the lifeguard. Then I started heading out to the person in trouble after I saw the lifeguard coming at the same point to join me there, so that we were protecting ourselves, so that we knew we could be better at saving and rescuing that person. And I think that drowning for love tragically is a story we see too often. And you know, I understand that as a parent, you see a child in trouble, or, you know, you see a wife or a husband in trouble, or a girlfriend or boyfriend, your first thought is to charge right in. And if you take those 2 or 3 steps, if nothing else, just grabbing a boogie board lying on the beach or grabbing a float, something to keep you afloat, chances are you're both going to be able to have another day on the beach and not have that one be your last one.
No, great words there. So let's shift a little bit. I want to get to this question about lightning at the beach. So lightning at the beach, what experiences can you speak to about events at the beach and the difficulty, and gosh, I resonate with this, the difficulty about getting people to leave, whether it's, a beach, people playing beach volleyball, people, have spent big money to be at the beach, and the last thing they want is, lightning out on the distance. They don't want to be inconvenienced. And as long as it's not raining, I'm staying at the beach. Do you see a lot of that? And what are some of the, clever techniques that lifeguards and sort of local officials can do to clear the danger area?
Yeah, and we can always yell land shark and hope that scares them off. But I think that one's been kind of debunked. It's a good question, and really, whether it's lightning and lifeguards are often in difficult positions. We're not police officers. We're not arresting people. We need to kind of share what we know and what we see, and come at it from a place of we're trying to help keep you safe. At the end of the day, if someone's going to go into the ocean when the guards aren't there, we can't restrain them. We're not going to stop them from doing that. If we have lightning in the area, if there are lightning strikes and radar, we're going to put up red no swim flags. We're going to technically close the beach. We're going to, in our area, alert every person there that you need to leave the beach. Good news is most people around this area know that the storms come and go maybe in an hour. So they're not looking at losing a week of beach time. They're going away for an hour where it's not going to be very pleasant to be out there anyway, for the most part. And in my experience of years of interacting with patrons and stuff, most of them are like, yeah, we'll leave. I mean, even when we've had to close the water, they've gotten out and we just explained to them, this is just temporary. We're doing a drill, or this is dangerous. We need to just, wait. It's not like we're asking them to end their whole vacation. And my experience is most people understand. I think, the good news is storms and lightning are something that people can see, they have an experience with, where it's actually almost harder to tell them why the 4-foot surf and the whitecaps are dangerous. And in my experience, we will be told, because the agency that employs us is also concerned about our well-being, that if it's lightning, we are told to leave the beach. We do not stay in the stands. We leave the beach. We are told to seek shelter. In the Weather Ready Nation world, we go find a safe place. That might be back beach, in the headquarters, or in a car, away and protected and away. But as lifeguards, the call will come out over the radio: seek shelter, close your beach, alert the patrons, and seek shelter. And in my experience, when the lifeguards are running for cover, most people tend to follow us.
All right. So you mentioned a safe place, which is dear to my heart as I lead our Safe Place Selfie campaign every April. And one of my favorite Safe Place selfies was, I think there were like 3 hunky lifeguards taking a selfie, and the message is always swim near the lifeguard stand. So let's sort of create a picture of what a true your safe place when you go to the beach. So number one, guard. You want to be at a time and a place where there are lifeguards in the stand. Correct.
Yes.
Number
and
one.
What you also mentioned was time. That there may be lifeguard stands on that beach, but you want lifeguards physically in that stand. So if the lifeguards come on duty at 9, that's when you should start your beach day.
That's right.
Set up your tents in advance, but 9 o'clock, when not just a guarded beach, but the hours that they're guarded. That's always going to be posted. If you're visiting a municipality or a city, they're going to tell you beaches are guarded from these hours.
All right. So you get to the beach, you identify where the guard stands are, you get there. You want to take some time. You don't want to just, drop everything and race into the water. You want to take a look at your conditions. Mm-hmm. And you're actually recommending, without distracting them and kind of, talking a little bit too long to them, engage your lifeguard, see, are they spotting something, or did they have issues yesterday that they're concerned about today, that type of thing. Get an engagement there. All right. So you've gotten there, you've got the guards, you've got, you've assessed everything. You're looking at the conditions, you're looking at the flags, you've gone over, what happens, you're staying calm. You get in the water. Tell me about some of the more subtle, things that you need to take action on, things like shallow water. I know, when I went to Virginia Beach, one thing I noticed, you can go from deep above your head water right at the wave break, and then you jump and you're in knee-high water at the sandbar, and then you go a little bit and then you're back down. If you're trying to body surf or boogie board and it's a 1.5 feet of water, I think, and you're diving, spinal cord injuries are happening, right?
Yep.
That is a danger.
Yeah. One of the, a drill that we probably do more than any is how to stabilize a victim with a suspected spinal cord injury in breaking waves and breaking surf. You'll see us lifeguards practice how to manually stabilize someone, and then how to, get them out of the water, keeping their spine stable when, literally the environment is chaos around you. And I think that, when we talk about that safe place, the ocean, as we talked about earlier, is dynamic open water. A coastal environment is a dynamic area that it's not just a weekend forecast. It's hour by hour. The tide in this area is changing roughly 10 inches per hour. A sandbar that's, 3 feet deep, 2 hours later might be less than a foot. So if you were body surfing at 10 o'clock and you go up and you have lunch back beach and you come back at 2 o'clock, that ocean could be completely different than it was 4 hours ago. And there's not many places you can go that can be that dramatically changed. And so that safe place also depends upon situational awareness. The safe place at the beach really depends upon what you are noticing and staying aware of. Because you might have shown up at a safe place at 10 o'clock, and all of a sudden at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, that's no longer a safe place. Maybe the waves have now come up and they're breaking in that area. And I think that situational awareness is key to maintaining that safety part of that. And you talk about the subtle things that a lot of people don't think about. Rip currents, we talk about a lot. Breaking waves, you talk about spinal cord injuries, and shallow water, and specifically shore break waves. And they can find videos on that specifically in the NOAA Ocean Today Wave Safe series on surviving shore break, and recognizing what causes that, which is a really steep beach with surf that comes up and slams down really quickly. So if someone's body surfing a wave and that beach, rather than nice and flat, so they're riding that wave in, actually is almost vertical, and they get driven into that. And without, going into a whole lot of detail, I think that, we see a lot of people get injured when they don't understand the changes in the bottom of what's underwater, the depth being kind of a key thing. You can walk out through one of our beaches and take a few steps, and all of a sudden it's waist or stomach high, and literally take 5 more steps and it's ankle deep. Because at a certain tide condition, we've got this gully that's really deep and a sandbar. So let's say you're diving out through the waves, and all of a sudden it's chest deep and you dive into something that's inches deep. We always tell, anyone going out through the surf, or if you're body surfing, keep your hands out in front, protect your head, protect your spine. But knowing the bottom contours and what that looks like. And what's also important is a lot of people go, well, I go to this beach and this vacation spot every year. My family's been coming here for 20 years. We go to the same beach. And as you and I know, the storms that we experience as year-round residents, the nor'easters and the hurricanes, can dramatically reshape an island and reshape a beach. Jetties that you've never seen before, rocks that you've never seen before can appear. Rocks that have always been there might be completely hidden by a beach replenishment or sand that's been washed up, but maybe just on the other side of the break, they're still there. So, you know, that's where the lifeguards, the local information becomes really important, that beaches can change from season to season, easily year to year, and from tide to tide. You know, the other thing that, you know, I used to live in Northern California where, you know, the water temperatures were, you know, a cold day in the water was 50 and a warm summer day in the water was 58. You know, it just, the temperatures didn't change much. Whereas over here in New Jersey, we'll have, you know, water that freezes in the bay. You know, I've seen slush in the waves at, you know, 31-degree water temperatures, but then in the summer it might be 80. But if we have a wind blowing in the right direction for 24 hours, the water temperature can drop 10, 15 degrees, literally in 24 hours. And if people aren't expecting it, they experience cold water shock. Let's say they fall off of a jetty or fall off of a pier or jump in and they're not ready for that cold water. It can cause a shock and it has a physiological impact on people, and it can elicit panic. All of a sudden they're like, I wasn't ready for this. And all of a sudden it becomes a dangerous condition. Whereas literally 24 hours earlier, the water was 75 degrees and they didn't even notice it.
No, these are all great points. I think what I experienced most is yes, the shallow, you know, environment of a sandbar or whatnot, but, you know, I'll be playing in the surf and I'll get hit by a wave and I'll be, you know, pushed toward the shore, and then I'll put my leg out, you know, to stand, to stabilize myself. And I'm in one of those deeper areas and I can't stand, right? And then the next wave comes and you're inhaling water because you're disoriented and you know, you're expecting something that didn't occur. It's very easy. And again, I can't stress enough, and I'm sure Bruckner, that you are in a dynamic environment. You don't have that with a pool where, you know, there are big numbers at the side of the pool that tell you how many feet the water depth is. Imagine, you know, if 1 second it's 5 and then someone comes in and paints a 3 and then paints a 7, you know, that's the environment that you're basically swimming in the ocean.
And real quick, as we're talking about waves and danger, you know, we're spending a lot of time talking about oceans, and people, you know, some of the people watching this now or later need to also recognize that large inland bodies, Great Lakes, you mentioned I swam across Lake Tahoe. Tahoe at times can act like an ocean. You can have waves, you can have chop, you can have, you know, dangerous currents that come up. You can have submerged rocks and hazards. You know, Lake Michigan, I have friends that guard off of Toronto in Canada. The Great Lakes can be as dangerous or more so than any ocean. I think that, you know, coastal environments, dynamic open water isn't just, you know, the beach that you go to. It might be the large lake just nearby. And I think that, you know, what we're talking about, you know, people need to know that applies to all these different coastal areas.
That's right. And we've seen rip current deaths in the Great Lakes. So great point there. All right. So we've got about 7 minutes left, and I want to give you some time to just start talking about the great resources out there, your website, NOAA's, you know, resources, you know, how do we get there? You know, what is the most, you know, like, what is your favorite safety piece? This is your time to kind of like unload on all of the great resources and content that people can take their time and discover.
Well, I got to speak real quickly. I originally became involved with NOAA through the National Marine Sanctuary Program. And the National Marine Sanctuary Program is charged with protecting some of our most amazing underwater treasures, from the Great Lakes to offshore areas like the Farallones, Cordell Bank, the flower gardens underwater, American Samoa. And, you know, part of sanctuaries, and it's coming up in a couple of weeks, is encouraging people to get into and connect with these beautiful, amazing waters. And it may not be a sanctuary. It might be your favorite state beach in Maryland. It might be your favorite vacation place on the Gulf. But we all have these special places that are water or coastlines that we love. And my involvement with NOAA that has then kind of evolved into working more closely with National Weather Service is I've realized that I've had the opportunity to dive into some of these amazing ocean environments. And I've been able to do it again and again because I've learned how to do it safely and how to make sure that even though I was taking on immense challenges in long swims, that I surrounded myself with knowledge and people that were going to keep me safe and give me the tools so that I could do it the next day or the day after. And I think that, you know, it's been great to work with National Weather Service on this Wave Safe series. We're in the process of, we created a Wave Safe quick guide, a poster that we'll probably share in a couple of minutes that they can find, that addresses a lot of the hazards that we've discussed, as well as the Take 10 initiative. And we're working right now on getting those up in some test locations where people are maybe going somewhere at a museum or an aquarium to learn more about the ocean environment they're near, or they're literally walking over a sand dune to get to the water. And I think that there is no better resource than in the myriad of departments and agencies within NOAA that are teaching you what's so special about some of these places and then how to be safe. I think that our foundation, our mission is summarized, and this has developed as we looked at going into this, is to positively impact how we all feel, think, and act towards our oceans and our communities, which means protecting our oceans and our waterways, as well as protecting the communities that are visiting them. And working as an ocean lifeguard and surf lifesaver that's been able to work with lifeguard agencies in Denmark and Poland and Canada and Australia, that while different agencies may operate a little bit differently, that there's this shared sort of passion for the water and helping others enjoy the same sort of positive experiences around the water that we do. And I think that specifically an arm or a part of NOAA Ocean Today that does a lot of the video content for many parts of NOAA is a great resource. If you go to NOAA Ocean Today, you can find the entire Wave Safe series. And when we filmed that, we went to very different geographic areas from the East Coast, Pacific Northwest, California, Hawaii, American Samoa, so that we could visit and share with people beaches that they might call home or that they may call their favorite places. And at the same time, you look at the Wave Safe series, we're giving you tools to stay safe and protect yourself and others if you run into dangerous situations. But then also going back to the Rip Current Survival Guide and learning about what to do and what to look for. And then deeper dives into just the mysteries and majestic parts of the ocean environment, from Great Lakes and underwater marine archaeology to the amazing wildlife. You know, whether you're fishing or swimming or surfing or just walking along the shore in the Pacific Northwest, NOAA, Ocean Today, National Marine Sanctuaries, and National Weather Service, it's my go-to. And then beyond that, I love places like the Monterey Bay Aquarium, which overlooks and oversees waters that I call home. And there are places like that that serve to share the experiences that some of us get to live all the time with people that may not be there all the time, to kind of teach that respect and that sense of awe of what's out there, but also keeping it positive at the same time and protecting it for all of us. You know, definitely come in and visit us at bcoceanpositive.org. We spend a good amount of our time also working with para-athletes, creating positive experiences for them to connect to the water. We really feel that the ocean and open water is a place that really should unify and strengthen anyone and everyone. And we believe that regardless of how you get to the water, you should be able to enjoy a positive, awe-filled experience there.
That's well point, Bruckner. And you know, if you listen to this entire hour, we don't want to scare anybody What we want is for people to respect the ocean and really have just a great experience, because it is a special place. We are, as human beings, connected, to the coast and to these great, amazing, ecosystems and the dynamic of it all. I want to thank you, Bruckner. And I also want to, sort of offer up to our weather band members that if you have a question, if you're watching the recording of this, that you can reach out and ask questions, and we can answer right back. Here's a good final question here for you, a little bit lighthearted. What SPF do you tell your lifeguards to use for sun protection?
I lean towards SPF 30. And the main thing is I put it on again and again and again. If you watch me during the course of the day, you will see me putting on Reef and Ocean Safe natural sunscreen. If I'm sitting on the beach for 8 hours, I will probably put on Ocean Safe, Reef Safe sunscreen probably 4 or 5 times. Like every hour or so, I'm putting it back on again, and you'll rarely see me without white marks across my face.
Apply and reapply. And the reapplying, yep, you might catch some areas that you missed. I've learned that with the kids.
And I'll tell you the other tip. It may look odd, but if you see me sitting on the stand, even if it's a 90-degree day, I'm often going to be wearing a long sleeve, loose technical shirt. I'll wear an SPF 50 rated long sleeve shirt because it's exhausting to have the sun baking your skin, even under sunscreen. And so to keep the sun off my skin it makes a huge difference. You'll see me in a long sleeve shirt most of the time on the beach.
Awesome, Bruckner. Thank you again. And again, for everybody, take some time, don't panic, and get out there and enjoy the beach.
Respect the ocean, stay aware, and take 10.
That's right. Thank you, Bruckner. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. We'll look for you on the shore.